Prudence had always known that life had its challenges. Born into a humble family in the outskirts of Midrand, she grew up watching her parents toil endlessly to make ends meet. Her mother was a seamstress, meticulously stitching clothes for neighbors, while her father worked long hours at a local factory. Despite their hard work, the family often struggled to put food on the table. Prudence's childhood was filled with dreams of a better life, of escaping the cycle of poverty that seemed to ensnare her family. As a young girl, Prudence often fantasized about the glamorous lives she saw on television. She longed for the elegance of the women in designer dresses and the luxury of expensive cars gliding through the streets. When she reached her teenage years, she vowed to change her destiny. Determined to create a brighter future, she poured her heart and soul into her studies, knowing that education was her key to escape. Upon finishing high school, Prudence faced a choice: continue her education or start working to support her family. With a heavy heart, she chose the latter. She landed a job as a waitress at the Golden Plate, one of the most luxurious restaurants in Midrand. The moment she stepped into the restaurant, her heart raced at the sight of the opulent decor, gleaming chandeliers, polished mahogany tables, and the soft glow of candlelight that danced across the faces of well-heeled patrons. It was a world far removed from her own. At first, Prudence struggled to adjust to the fast-paced environment. Juggling trays laden with gourmet dishes while navigating through the crowded dining room was no easy task. Yet, her dedication and warm smile quickly earned her the admiration of both her colleagues and customers. The tips she received, while modest, were a lifeline, helping her support her family while providing a glimpse into the life she yearned for. Among the patrons, one stood out from the rest. Jackson was a striking figure, exuding an air of confidence and charm that turned heads wherever he went. Dressed in tailored suits and sporting an expensive watch, he was the epitome of success. The way he interacted with the waitstaff, polite yet commanding, immediately captured Prudence's attention. He often dined alone, enjoying lavish meals accompanied by fine wines, always leaving a generous tip. Prudence couldn't help but feel drawn to him. His magnetic personality made her heart flutter, and she found herself daydreaming about what it would be like to be the object of his affection. As fate would have it, Jackson soon began to take notice of Prudence. He would engage her in conversation during his visits, complimenting her on her service and the grace with which she handled the busy restaurant. It wasn't long before a subtle chemistry began to develop between them. One evening, as Prudence was serving him his usual steak, Jackson leaned closer, his voice low and enticing. "You know, Prudence, I see a spark in you. You have a rare kind of beauty." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She could feel her cheeks flush as she stammered a polite thank you, her heart racing at the unexpected compliment. Jackson's interest in Prudence deepened, and their conversations grew more personal. He learned about her background, her dreams, and the sacrifices she had made for her family. In return, he shared stories of his own life, painting a picture of a man who had worked hard to achieve his wealth and success. As the weeks passed, Prudence found herself captivated by him, her fantasies of a better life intertwining with the reality of their budding relationship. One night, after finishing her shift, Prudence spotted Jackson waiting for her outside the restaurant. His presence made her heart skip a beat. "I've been wanting to speak with you," he said, his eyes sparkling with interest. He invited her for a drink at a nearby upscale lounge. Nervously, Prudence agreed, her mind racing with excitement and apprehension. At the lounge, they sat in a cozy corner, the ambience warm and inviting. Jackson ordered a bottle of champagne, and they toasted to new beginnings. As they talked and laughed, Prudence felt a connection that she had never experienced before. Jackson's charm was intoxicating, and she found herself hanging on his every word. "I can see so much potential in you, Prudence," Jackson said, leaning in closer. You deserve so much more than this life. I could help you, you know. With my connections, I could open doors for you. All you have to do is be open to it. Prudence's heart raced at the thought of a life beyond the restaurant. What do you mean? She asked, a mix of curiosity and caution in her voice. I mean, I could help you achieve your dreams. You wouldn't have to work so hard. You could enjoy the finer things in life, he replied, his gaze intense and persuasive. You just have to trust me and be a little submissive. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Prudence felt a flutter of uncertainty. She had always prided herself on her independence, her determination to make her own way. Yet, the allure of Jackson's proposition was undeniable. As the night wore on, she found herself drawn to him, intoxicated by the prospect of a life filled with luxury and ease. Over the next few weeks, Prudence and Jackson's relationship blossomed. He swept her off her feet, showering her with gifts, expensive clothes, designer handbags, and lavish dinners at exclusive restaurants. She was living a fairy tale, the kind she had only dreamed of as a child. But as the days turned into weeks, Prudence noticed a shift in Jackson's demeanor. The charming man she had fallen for seemed to change, revealing a more possessive and controlling side. One evening, as they sat in his lavish apartment, Jackson broached a topic that would alter the course of Prudence's life. You know, I have a special way of showing appreciation to those I care about, he said, his tone serious. If you want to continue enjoying this lifestyle, there are things you need to do for me. Prudence's heart raced as she listened intently, her instinct screaming to be cautious. Jackson leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's a ritual that requires your participation. It's something I do for those I cherish. You have to be willing to give a part of yourself to keep this life. Prudence felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of participation? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You must feed my pet snake your menstrual blood, he replied matter-of-factly. The words sent shockwaves through her. It's a tradition in my family. The snake absorbs your energy, and in return, it will protect you and ensure our bond remains strong. Her heart raced with disbelief. This was not what she had envisioned when she dreamt of a better life. I can't do that, she exclaimed, her voice trembling. That's insane. Jackson's expression darkened. You need to understand, Prudence. This is the price of luxury. If you refuse, you risk losing everything I've given you. The threat loomed over her like a dark cloud. Prudence felt trapped, torn between the life she wanted and the demands of a man she had grown to care for. Days turned into nights, and Prudence wrestled with her decision. The temptation of luxury, of living in a world of elegance and ease, gnawed at her. The thought of returning to her humble beginnings filled her with dread. Jackson's gifts were intoxicating, but the cost was steep, and deep down, she knew it was wrong. In a moment of desperation, Prudence decided to confront Jackson. She gathered her courage and sought him out, determined to express her fears. When she found him, he was lounging on the couch, an air of confidence surrounding him. Prudence, he said, glancing up with a smirk, have you thought more about my proposal? With a deep breath, she replied, I can't do it, Jackson. I won't give up a part of myself for this lifestyle. His expression hardened. You need to understand, Prudence. You can't have it both ways. You either commit fully or leave. The ultimatum hung heavily in the air, suffocating her hopes for a future. Prudence felt tears welling in her eyes. She had to choose between her dreams and her dignity. She longed for the life Jackson had promised but couldn't bear the thought of sacrificing herself in the process. In a moment of clarity, she realized that no amount of luxury was worth the cost of her soul. But as she turned to leave, Jackson's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Think carefully, Prudence. If you walk away, you may never find another chance like this again." His words echoed in her mind as she stepped out into the night, her heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty. In the days that followed, Prudence wrestled with her decision. She watched as Jackson continued to live a life of extravagance, while she clung to her memories of a simpler, yet fulfilling existence. She found herself longing for the warmth of her family's love and the satisfaction of earning her way in the world. As she continued to serve customers at the Golden Plate, she noticed other women who had fallen into the same trap. They, too, were caught in relationships that promised riches but demanded their souls in return. Prudence vowed that she would not become one of them. She would reclaim her life and her dreams. But the allure of Jackson's world lingered in the back of her mind. Every glance at the luxurious handbags and dresses she had accumulated served as a reminder of what she could lose. The fear of returning to poverty weighed heavily on her heart, as did the knowledge that Jackson was no longer the man she had fallen for. Finally, the day arrived when Prudence knew she had to make a choice. She gathered her courage and confronted Jackson one last time. As she stepped into his apartment, she felt a sense of determination wash over her. "I can't do this anymore, Jackson. I refuse to be a part of your rituals. I choose my dignity over your lifestyle," she declared, her voice steady. Jackson's expression twisted into anger, his charm fading into something more sinister. "You think you can just walk away? You're nothing without me. You'll regret this decision." The threat was palpable, yet Prudence felt a surge of empowerment. She was ready to reclaim her life, no matter the cost. Prudence stepped out of Jackson's lavish apartment, her heart pounding in her chest as she wrestled with the weight of her decision. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming jacarandas that lined the streets of Midrand. She felt a sense of freedom washing over her, but with it came the pangs of uncertainty. What would her life look like now that she had turned her back on the seductive lifestyle that Jackson had offered? Would she be able to reclaim her dreams, or would she forever be haunted by the ghosts of her choices? As she walked home, Prudence replayed the moment she had confronted Jackson over and over in her mind. His angry outburst had shaken her, she could still feel the heat of his glare. She had never seen that side of him before, the dark shadow lurking beneath the charming exterior. It terrified her, yet it also filled her with determination. She had made her choice, and now she had to embrace it. Upon arriving home, Prudence was greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of her family's modest living quarters. Her parents were sitting at the kitchen table, sharing a simple meal of rice and beans. The warmth of their presence wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. She had missed this, the uncomplicated joy of being surrounded by family. She could hear her younger siblings laughing in the background, their innocent giggles reminding her of the life she had almost traded away. "How was work, dear?" her mother asked, her voice laced with genuine interest. Prudence hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to share about her recent experiences. Instead, she forced a smile and replied, "It was busy, as usual." Her mother nodded, but Prudence could see the concern etched on her face. It was no secret that her job at the Golden Plate came with its own set of challenges. "You know, Prudence, it's important to stay true to yourself," her father chimed in, his voice steady and reassuring. "No amount of money is worth compromising who you are." Those words resonated deep within her. Prudence felt the weight of her father's wisdom settle over her like a warm embrace. She had chosen her dignity over wealth, and she would not let anyone sway her from that path. As the days turned into weeks, Prudence settled back into her routine. She worked hard at the restaurant, serving customers with a smile, her spirit gradually regaining its brightness. Yet, the shadow of Jackson loomed over her, haunting her thoughts. The luxurious gifts he had lavished upon her still lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of the life she had momentarily tasted. She tried to banish those thoughts, focusing instead on the small joys in her life, the laughter of her siblings, the smell of her mother's cooking, the comfort of her family's love. But as winter descended upon Midrand, Prudence's resolve was put to the test. Jackson had not let her go easily. He began showing up at the Golden Plate, slipping through the door with an air of confidence that sent shivers down her spine. He would sit at the bar, ordering expensive cocktails, his gaze fixed on her as she worked. Every time their eyes met, a mix of anger and longing surged within her. She could see the frustration in his demeanor, the way he clenched his jaw, and the occasional glint of menace in his eyes. One evening, as she was wiping down a table, Jackson approached her. "Prudence," he said, his voice low and smooth, "you can't ignore me forever." His presence was like a storm cloud hovering over her, and she felt her stomach knot in response. "What do you want, Jackson?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. "I want you back," he said simply, his eyes darkening with intensity. "You think you can walk away from this? You need to understand the implications of your choice." Prudence's heart raced, a mix of fear and defiance coursing through her veins. "I made my choice," she replied, standing her ground. "I won't be a part of your rituals or your demands." Jackson leaned in closer, a sinister smile creeping across his lips. "You think you're strong, don't you? But let me remind you, Prudence, the life you desire is within reach if you just submit to me. I can give you everything you ever wanted, but you have to pay the price." His words dripped with malice, the promise of luxury twisted into a threat. Prudence felt a shiver run down her spine. "I won't be your pawn," she shot back, her voice firm. "I'd rather work hard and earn my way than live in a gilded cage." "You're making a mistake," he replied, his voice a low growl as he stepped back. "You may think you're free now, but I can make your life a living hell." With that, he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Prudence shaken but resolute. The following days were filled with tension. Prudence felt as though she was constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for Jackson to strike. The other waitstaff noticed her change in demeanor, she was more on edge, and her laughter was tinged with unease. They were concerned but could do little to ease her worries. She decided to focus on her work and her dreams, reminding herself that she was strong enough to resist him. As the weeks turned into months, Prudence's life began to shift in unexpected ways. Her dedication at the restaurant caught the attention of the management, and she was offered a promotion. She could hardly believe it. The new position came with a slight pay increase and more responsibilities, but it was a step toward her goal of financial independence. With her newfound role, Prudence felt empowered. She poured her energy into her work, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere for the guests. She began to develop relationships with regular patrons, who appreciated her friendly demeanor and attentive service. The restaurant flourished under her influence, and she took pride in being a part of its success. However, the shadow of Jackson remained ever present. He continued to lurk in the corners of her mind, waiting for an opportunity to strike. It was as if he had embedded himself in her very thoughts. Each time she heard the door chime, her heart raced in fear, and she would brace herself for his arrival. One night, as Prudence was closing up the restaurant, she found herself alone in the dimly lit space. The sounds of clinking glasses and laughter faded into silence, replaced by an unsettling quiet. She felt a chill creep down her spine, her instincts on high alert. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and Jackson strode in, a menacing smile on his face. "Oh, Prudence," he drawled, his voice dripping with false charm. "Working late, I see. You're so dedicated. It's commendable." "Jackson," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you want?" "I just came to talk," he replied, stepping closer. I miss you, you know. We had something special. We had nothing special, Prudence shot back, her fear giving way to anger. You manipulated me. You thought you could control me, but I'm not yours to own. Jackson's smile faded, replaced by a cold expression. You should be careful, Prudence. You have no idea what I'm capable of. You think you're safe here. I can ruin your life in an instant. His threat hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating her. But Prudence stood her ground, refusing to back down. You can't control me, Jackson. I won't let you. With that, she turned away from him and walked toward the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest. The tension was palpable as she could feel his eyes on her, seething with rage. She quickly busied herself with cleaning up, trying to ignore the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Just as she was about to leave, Jackson blocked her path. You think you can walk away from this? I gave you everything, he spat, his voice low and dangerous. Prudence's heart raced as she met his gaze. You gave me nothing but lies and threats. I won't be your pawn any longer. Jackson's expression shifted, and for a moment, she saw the desperation in his eyes. You're making a mistake, Prudence. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. With that, he stormed out, leaving Prudence shaken but determined. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was stronger than she had ever believed. As the weeks passed, Prudence began to feel the weight of Jackson's threats. They loomed over her like dark clouds, threatening to engulf her in despair. She tried to focus on her work, but the anxiety gnawed at her. She began to withdraw from her friends, and the vibrant joy she once felt while serving customers faded into a dull ache of fear and uncertainty. Each night, she would scan the room, half expecting Jackson to make an appearance, his presence a reminder of the darkness that lingered just beyond her reach. One evening, while she was tidying up after a busy dinner service, Prudence overheard two of her co-workers discussing the recent disappearance of a woman who had been dating a wealthy man. The details were chilling, and Prudence couldn't help but shiver as she listened. The story mirrored her own situation, and for the first time, she felt a surge of panic. What if Jackson does something to me, she thought, her mind racing. The weight of fear settled heavily on her chest, tightening like a vice. She had heard enough stories to understand the dangerous games some wealthy men played when they felt they were losing control. That night, Prudence decided she needed to take action. She couldn't let fear dictate her life any longer. She reached out to Nondi, her best friend, and asked if they could meet for coffee the next day. As she lay in bed that night, her mind swirled with thoughts of Jackson and the threats he had made. The memories of their relationship flooded her mind, his charm, the gifts, the intoxicating thrill of luxury. But those moments were overshadowed by the reality of his manipulation and control. She had to be strong, she had to protect herself. The next day, Prudence met Nondi at a cozy cafe. The warmth of the coffee shop was inviting, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. As they settled into their seats, Nondi looked at Prudence with concern. You seem different, she said softly. What's going on? Taking a deep breath, Prudence opened up about her fears. She recounted her confrontations with Jackson, the threats he had made, and the unsettling stories she had heard about other women. As she spoke, Nondi listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. You need to be careful, Prudence, Nondi said, her voice low and urgent. I know you're strong, but you shouldn't underestimate him. He seems dangerous. I know, Prudence replied, her voice shaking. I've been feeling so anxious lately. I just want to be free from him, but I'm scared of what he might do. Nondi reached across the table and squeezed Prudence's hand. You don't have to face this alone. Let's talk to someone, maybe the authorities. They can help you. Prudence hesitated, the thought of involving the police filling her with dread. Would they even take her seriously? Would Jackson retaliate if they did? But as she looked into Nandi's supportive eyes, she felt a glimmer of hope. She couldn't let fear control her any longer. Over the next few days, Prudence and Nandi devised a plan. They would document every encounter Prudence had with Jackson, noting the dates, times, and details of their conversations. Prudence felt a sense of empowerment as they compiled their evidence, each piece a testament to her strength and determination to reclaim her life. That Friday, Prudence finally mustered the courage to visit the local police station with Nandi by her side. As they walked through the doors, Prudence felt her heart race. The station was bustling with officers and civilians, the air thick with tension. She approached the front desk, where a stern-looking officer greeted them. "What can I help you with?" he asked, glancing up from his paperwork. Prudence took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'd like to report a case of harassment," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. She recounted her experiences with Jackson, detailing his threats and the fear she felt. The officer listened intently, his expression shifting from indifference to concern. After she finished, he nodded. "We take these matters seriously. I'll need you to fill out a report, and we can start an investigation." Prudence felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, she was taking control of her life. With Nandi's support, Prudence completed the paperwork, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As they left the station, she felt a sense of empowerment surging through her. She was taking a stand against the man who had tried to manipulate her, and it felt liberating. Over the following weeks, Prudence focused on her job and her personal growth. The police were actively investigating Jackson, and she felt a sense of relief knowing that she had taken the first step toward freeing herself from his grip. She immersed herself in her work, pouring her energy into her responsibilities at the Golden Plate. Her coworkers began to notice the change in her demeanor. She was more confident, more at ease. But as Jackson learned of her actions, his demeanor changed dramatically. He began to retaliate in subtle ways, showing up at the restaurant unannounced, glaring at her from across the dining room, and making sure to flaunt his wealth in front of her. His visits became increasingly tense, and Prudence could feel the anger radiating from him like heat from a flame. One evening, as she was preparing for the dinner rush, Jackson walked in, his presence like a dark cloud looming over her. He approached her with a chilling smile that sent shivers down her spine. "I hear you've been talking to the police," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You really think you can get away from me?" Prudence's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "I'm not afraid of you, Jackson. I will not let you control my life anymore." His smile faded, replaced by a menacing glare. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. You think you can just walk away from all this? You'll regret it, Prudence. I promise you that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Prudence shaken. She hurried to the back of the restaurant, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. But she refused to let him intimidate her. She had taken a stand, and she wouldn't back down now. As the weeks turned into a blur of tension and fear, Prudence found solace in the support of her family and friends. Nandi was always there, reminding her of her strength and resilience. She often joined Prudence during her shifts, providing a comforting presence in the face of Jackson's intimidation. Together, they would joke and laugh, creating an atmosphere of camaraderie that filled Prudence with hope. One day, as they were cleaning up after a busy lunch service, Nandi suggested they plan a small getaway. "You need a break, Prudence. Let's go to the coast for the weekend. A little sun and sand will do you good." Prudence hesitated at first, the idea of leaving the city felt like a dream she couldn't quite grasp. But as she looked into Nandi's encouraging eyes, she felt a flicker of excitement. "That sounds amazing," she finally agreed, her spirits lifting. "I could use some time away." They planned the trip, eager for the opportunity to escape the suffocating atmosphere of Midrand. When the weekend arrived, Prudence felt a rush of excitement as they drove toward the coast. The salty sea breeze welcomed them, and she felt the tension in her shoulders ease as they set foot on the soft, warm sand. For the first time in months, Prudence laughed freely, basking in the sun's glow and the sound of crashing waves. They spent their days exploring the coastline, enjoying fresh seafood, and forgetting, even if just for a moment, the darkness that had shadowed Prudence for so long. But as the sun began to set on their final day, Prudence's thoughts drifted back to Jackson. She felt a pang of anxiety as she realized that escaping to the coast didn't erase the reality she faced back home. Would he be waiting for her when she returned? What would he do next? That night, as they sat by the beach with a bonfire crackling nearby, Prudence confided in Nandi. "I'm scared, Nandi. What if he finds me? What if he retaliates for this? I just want to be free." Nandi reached for Prudence's hand, squeezing it gently. "You're stronger than you realize, Prudence. You've already taken the hardest step. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side. You don't have to face this alone." Feeling comforted by her friend's words, Prudence found a renewed sense of determination. She realized that while Jackson's threats loomed over her, she had the power to shape her own destiny. She would not allow fear to dictate her life any longer. When they returned to Midrand, Prudence felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. She resumed her work at the Golden Plate, her heart racing each time she heard the door chime. Jackson's visits became less frequent, but she could still feel his presence lurking in the shadows. Each glance in the mirror reminded her of the strength she had found during her getaway, and she vowed to keep that fire alive. Weeks passed, and Prudence continued to document every interaction with Jackson, determined to stand firm in her decision to break free. One evening, as she was closing up the restaurant, she received a text message from an unknown number. Her heart sank as she opened it, recognizing Jackson's voice in the words that followed. "You think you're safe? You can't hide from me, Prudence. I will find you." Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to breathe. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She quickly took a screenshot of the message and sent it to the police, her heart pounding as she did so. The feeling of empowerment began to wash over her once again. The next day, she received a call from the police. They had enough evidence to take Jackson's threats seriously, and they were ready to take action. Prudence felt a surge of relief. She was no longer alone in this fight. They assured her that they would do everything in their power to keep her safe. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was no longer living in fear, she was taking charge of her life, and it felt liberating. The road ahead would still be challenging, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. Weeks turned into months, and Prudence continued to rebuild her life. She poured herself into her work, and the management recognized her dedication, promoting her to a managerial position. The responsibility felt empowering, and she reveled in the opportunity to lead her team and create a positive work environment. Her confidence soared as she realized that she was capable of achieving her dreams without relying on anyone else. One evening, while she was closing up the restaurant, she received a call from Nandi. "Prudence, guess what? I have something exciting to share." Curious, Prudence replied, "What is it?" "I got accepted into a program for aspiring restaurant managers. I'll be training at one of the top restaurants in the city." Nandi's voice was filled with excitement, and Prudence couldn't help but smile. "That's amazing. You deserve it, Nandi." Prudence cheered, feeling genuine joy for her friend. They talked excitedly about the future and their dreams, their bond growing even stronger. As Prudence hung up the phone, she felt a rush of gratitude for the support system she had built. She had faced her fears, reclaimed her life, and found strength in the relationships she cherished. The dark cloud that had once hung over her slowly dissipated, replaced by the light of hope and possibility. But just as she was beginning to feel a sense of normalcy, the doorbell rang. Prudence's heart raced as she approached the door, a mix of apprehension and curiosity swirling within her. When she opened the door, she was met with an unexpected sight. Jackson stood on her doorstep, a manic look in his eyes. "Prudence," he shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. "You can't escape me. I've done everything for you." Fear washed over her, but she stood her ground. "Get away from me, Jackson. I don't want anything to do with you." His expression darkened, and she could see the rage boiling beneath the surface. "You think you can just throw me away? I'll ruin you. You'll see." He stepped closer, his demeanor becoming threatening. But Prudence had come too far to be intimidated. She called out for her neighbor, her voice steady as she faced him. "You need to leave, Jackson. I've reported your threats to the police." His eyes widened, a mix of anger and surprise crossing his face. "You think they can protect you? You're nothing without me." "That's where you're wrong," Prudence replied firmly. "I am everything because I have chosen to stand up for myself. I won't be your victim any longer." Jackson's anger flared, and he took a step back, realizing that he had lost control. "This isn't over, Prudence," he hissed before turning on his heel and storming away. Prudence felt her heart racing, but she was no longer afraid. She had taken a stand, and she would not let Jackson intimidate her any longer. She quickly called Nandi, recounting the encounter and feeling grateful for the strength she had found within herself. In the following days, Prudence took extra precautions. She became more vigilant, ensuring that she was never alone in vulnerable situations. She reported Jackson's latest threat to the police, and they increased patrols around her neighborhood. Each day felt like a battle, but with the support of her family and friends, she knew she was not alone. As weeks passed, Prudence's resolve strengthened. She found solace in her work and the relationships she had built, and slowly, the fear that had once consumed her began to fade. The police informed her that they were building a case against Jackson, and he was being monitored closely. One evening, while closing the restaurant, Prudence felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had come so far, reclaiming her life from the grasp of fear and manipulation. With every challenge she faced, she grew stronger, learning the true meaning of resilience. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, she looked up at the stars, a sense of hope filling her heart. The future was uncertain, but she knew she had the strength to face whatever came her way. No longer would she be defined by her past or the choices of others. She was Prudence, a woman of strength and determination, ready to forge her own path.